All right, now we get into a lot of the fun stuff, a lot of the nitty gritty, and some of the key activities and things that are important when we think about corporate communication and really what this whole organization society part is all about. And so I've got some images up here, some logos. I want you to think about what comes to mind when you think about the image and the reputation of Starbucks. What are they known for besides just coffee and the products they have? Who are they? Right? How are they different from any other place where you might be able to go get coffee? Think about Johnson and Johnson. Not only what do they make, but who are they? What might be their image and reputation in the minds of different kinds of stakeholders, even moms versus dads? If you ask them what Johnson and Johnson is all about, how about Panero? What are they known for? What's their experience, for instance, compared to a place like Starbucks? What about the Dos Equis guy? What value does he bring by being sort of an image of the Dos Equis brand? And what about Nike? What are they known for? How are they different, for instance, from Adidas or any other kind of shoe company or otherwise an apparel company? And then we have Belmont. How is Belmont? What is Belmont's identity and what's their reputation? Specifically, then thinking about how is Belmont different from any of the other universities, Tribeca, Vanderbilt, any of the Lipscomb right here in town. I mean, at the end of the day, they're all private schools. They're all expensive. And so what would differentiate somebody? Why would they choose Belmont just based on thinking about what they know about it? So these are some of the really, really critical terms and concepts and processes that we're going to talk about that are really important when organizations think about existing within a given society. And it gets down to a lot of really specific things that we're going to get into now. So I want to start off with something for us to think about. The key goal, and you might think about this as key goal of corporate communication, is one of the primary ways organizations manage relationships with stakeholders is by building and maintaining their reputations. Okay, so if corporate communication is about relationships, well, one way that we can build relationships is by having a good reputation. Well, what you might also think about, and what I'd like for you to think about, is those things are reciprocal, right? So you have a good, positive reputation that's going to strengthen your relationships. Which the more and better relationships you have, the stronger your reputation. So that's kind of this iterative and cyclical process that's so important when we think about organizations and the societies in which they exist, and then as well as when we think about what professional communication people are, what their jobs are, right? So we're going to get into some of that as we go through here. So I'm going to kind of think of a couple of things when we think about an image. We're going to just start there. What does an image offer an organization, right? Well, first off, it offers a sense of distinctiveness, right? So if I were to ask you how Starbucks and Panera are different, or how Starbucks and a place like Dunkin' Donuts is different, you could probably talk about their coffee and some of what they offer, but chances are you might also pull from what you think you know about Starbucks, maybe what their restaurants are like, what kind of experience you get, and a lot of that has to do with image, right? With the image that they project, that maybe you also get to experience, and so it helps customers recognize and keep brands distinct. But then also internally, right? There's a great deal of advantaged internally in terms of employees being proud to work for an organization that has a positive image as well. And so those are really important things to think about. The second is that there's a direct impact on the performance of an organization the more that it develops a positive image, right, within society. So think about image as the immediate set of associations that people have with an organization at a given time, right? Immediate set of associations at a given time. And so those can be somewhat subject to change depending on what happens, right? In an issue or a crisis arises, organizations that sometimes their image can be tarnished. So the next thing I want to talk about is identity. This model is in your textbook, but it's a really important one to think. Okay, look at the center of the picture there. That all organizations have a personality, right? They have a set of values. They have a personality, kind of like a thumbprint, right? How each individual, how we all have our own personalities and our own thumbprint. So it is with organizations. The question then becomes, how do we project that, right? How do we tell people who we are? How do organizations tell who they are? Turns out the way they do that is through a number of activities in which they communicate with society, right? And so, for instance, this model shows us three. One is communication. They'll outright come out and tell organizations what they're a part of. So live consciously, eat deliciously. Slogans, for instance, project an identity and communicate and project an identity and an image, but also through symbolism, right? So Dos Equis clearly was trying to project an image of sophistication versus if you were to look at some of the symbolism around other kinds of beers, you wouldn't necessarily see that, right? And so they were trying to project this image of a guy, really nice, he's really interesting. And so to drink Dos Equis is to be interesting. And they have a new campaign now where it's live, make things interessante, right? So they're projecting a certain kind of image with that. That's part of what they want to be known as. And you think about other kinds of organizations that universities and the kind of logos that they select as well are really important for projecting a certain kind of image and really getting us to attach to a brand. Another thing that they do is through their behavior. And so I've got some images up there. For instance, whenever organizations like Deloitte send their entire workforce out for an entire day to work and volunteer in the community, they're trying to project an image and tell people who they are. And so that's a really important way that all three of those ways, behavior, communication, symbolism, project who we are internally, because otherwise people don't know what we value as a business. So they interact with society through those activities, among other types of things. So the other thing that organizations do is they want to build a strong brand. They want to, like the logo and the symbolism gives them visibility. It helps to differentiate one organization from another in terms of distinctiveness. It gives people a sense whenever organizations have strong reputations of who they are, what they're really about, what their values are. So there's authenticity there. And then also it helps an organization be consistent whenever they have one brand. For instance, if you have a big organization that owns a bunch of organizations, the strong corporate brand gives them a reputation and allows them to be consistent when they're communicating with stakeholders. Well, the question that becomes is how do you make sure that, what are the keys then to branding and reputation? And there's going to be a couple of factors that I want to talk about. It's really all about alignment, making sure that everything internally and externally are aligned and they're working in sync like we see in the image here. So let's go through these. I just want to go through each kind of pair of possibilities here to see what this may look like. So for instance, we want to make sure that where the organization's heading, what their strategy is, what their vision is, matches what the employees internally are doing. Does it inspire people? So for instance, this image this logo here is a business that my dad used to work for and retired from, called Humco. Humco is a consumer goods product company. So basically a pharmaceutical company, right? That makes over-the-counter products. They're based in Texas. Their stated vision was to be a company that takes care of people, right? And they want to be healthy. And so one thing they did was they eliminated smoking at their factory, because they want to take care of people and have people be healthy. Well, the problem with that was internally, the culture wasn't aligned with that because most of the employees smoked. So they had to really deal with that. They had to figure out how they were going to get those two cultures aligned. The second thing is aligning culture, so internal with the external image. So a lot of times you'll see, for instance, really important issues in society, for instance, like domestic violence and sexual assault, that's an important issue in society. So we want to make sure that employees understand what those are and they interact with stakeholders in the community, right? So you'll see organizations that will send people out to volunteer, for instance, to have a booth at the Pride Parade, right, or whatever it may be. Internally, making sure that matches with the external image that people have of the organization. And then, do employees care what those stakeholders think, and can we get them to interact with them and be ambassadors? So these are just questions. These are diagnostic questions that businesses can ask to make sure these things are aligned. Finally, does the vision, like where we're headed, does it match what our stakeholders want? Who are our stakeholders? How do we communicate? Remember last unit, we talked about the dialogue strategy. Can we figure out who we want, where we're going to go in a way that doesn't alienate our stakeholders? Two examples. One is Dr. Pepper a couple of years ago came out with Dr. Pepper 10. And their slogan was "It's not for women." Well, the problem was that was their vision. The problem was a lot of women drink Dr. Pepper. They didn't like that very much. So then they kind of had to back off of that a little bit. So when you see businesses rebrand and then immediately come back off of that rebranding, that's because these two things got misaligned. The other one was JCPenney a few years back. They tried to eliminate sales, and that didn't work too well because people like the image of of a sale. So those are just a few of the important things for us to think about in this unit. Thank you.